Marketplace meeting, 2:30. The date is 14th of August. I want to start with the agenda.
I can, we're gonna start with introductions. Next, we'll go into a recap of activities to date, including, the purpose of the advisory committee and what the goals are. Then we will invite, Amy Hovey to speak on MISHDA initiatives, and we can have a question and answer with her and her team about the development or anything else that she's willing to talk about. And then our last item agenda item is next steps. So it's pretty high level agenda, starting with introductions.
Sure, Mark Garcia, I handle our state legislative affairs at MISHDA.
Josh Pugh, I'm a director of external affairs at MISHDA.
Dean Seaberg, Elk County Chair.
Amy Hovey, I am the executive director at MISHDA.
Pam Johnson, Elk County Treasurer, and also Elk County Land Bank Chair.
Joel Vanderbilt, Elder County Clerk.
Jill Ferrari, Renovari Development.
Shannon Morgan, Renovari Development.
Rod Desjardins, an interested citizen and past mayor of Munising for 20 years, who has made 5 unsuccessful attempts to build workforce housing while mayor, and an additional attempt while the housing director of community action.
And the folks online.
Want to turn it over? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Champagne, interested citizen and journalist.
Did we lose Jim Tischler?
I see him. Jim.
I'm here. Good afternoon. I'm Jim Tischler, State Land Bank. Happy Wednesday to y'all.
So the next item on our agenda is a recap. Commissioner, I'm happy to walk through what we've done so far unless you wanna add anything.
Nope, I spoke with Pam, tried to get an update there from last meeting.
Okay. We initiated these advisory committee meetings in June. The purpose of the advisory committee is to advise the project. It includes stakeholders such as Alger County, who is the host of the committee and leads the activities of the committee. But it also includes the DDA, the city of Munising, and other interested organizations, including the State Land Bank, who have all participated. This is our 3rd meeting. The goal of the committee is to come to a consensus on a redesign of Munising Marketplace that can be financed and that can be constructed, that we can move forward with. One of the questions that we asked in our initial session was the population that needed to be served by the development. So we walked through data on local population, workforce, and a whole host of other data to start a conversation around who it is that needs to be served by the development. Please jump in if anyone.
I would just add, I know Amy is pretty familiar because she speaks with us fairly regularly on the project. Just for the rest of the MISHDA team, this is a project we've been working on for numerous years. It was originally really structured for a lot of the ARPA and other new financing that was coming out of the pipeline. It was a mixed use development, really focused. Number one, it was the first rural transformational, and by the way, it was the first rural transformational that set policy. So, you know, the fact that we could create a rural transformational brownfield project that had social impact, had grocery and childcare, as well as attainable, you know, affordable units. That was a precedent that we moved through legislatively. It was the original design, incorporated new market tax credits, a large new market tax credit allocation, and it was a very, very ambitious and difficult capital stack. One of the challenges that we had originally is we had secured almost all of the pieces of the financial stack. Jill put together, actually, it received an award for a $20 million new market allocation through 2 syndicators. The transformational brownfield was strategically approved. We got through the entire public process, with an internal approval, ready to move to MSF. And we, at the time, there were requirements within some of the MEDC financing, to get all of our leaseholders in place. And we were still trying to secure the leaseholder for the grocery store. And at that time, we were notified that all of their financing, all of their federal financing was committed for this fiscal year. So as Jill said, part of that initiative was to deconstruct a building that was built and designed based on the financing mechanisms. In that, we did receive a missing middle award through MSHA, that we had to rescind because of timing. And Jill's gonna go through, part of this is that we've had to restructure to look at the tools. The previous building, the design that we had, we were looking at a $9 to $10 million gap without the loss. The big thing here was that we lost new market tax credits. We're no longer eligible for the census tract. So we had to be they expired in August of this year. So that census tract is no longer eligible for new market tax credits. So part of this initiative, really, the state land bank came to the table because the land bank is an actual partner in the development entity. The land bank, we do have a pre-development financing source that the county has guaranteed through the state land bank. We've had most of the initial due diligence. This committee was convened to restructure, as Jill's gonna get into right now, restructure the capital stack, redesign. But part of this is just, a lot of community questions. There's been a lot of concern about what is low-income housing tax credit, what is affordable units, concerned about what it means to the community. And that's part of the questions that we're going to be asking. What does it look like? How can we be competitive in looking at this restructure? So I'll let Jill dig in and kind of tell you where we're at. This committee also was convened because that we were getting different feedback between the city, the DDA needs and the county. So obviously the county's put it together to have public transparency, and ensuring that all of the goals of the community are aligned. And we're on a public platform that we're speaking, overall to meet consensus on that moving forward.
So the original design of the building was approximately 45,000 square feet with 39 units and approximately 10,000 square feet of commercial on the ground floor. And as Shannon said, we had about a $9 million gap that we were hoping MEDC would fill back in the fourth quarter. We have restructured the size of the building.
City manager can't get into the meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, Joe.
No, good to know. Devin, we're just going through a recap of how we got to this point. We've decided to shrink the volume of the building a little bit in order to shrink the gap, but definitely had the understanding that we still needed a tax credit program or something that would really provide a large chunk of equity, like the new market tax credit did in the previous structure. So we had a extensive conversation with the advisory committee and the folks that were present about the populations that needed to be served and the incomes targeted and rents that were appropriate for the community. And we got good feedback that the rents that we are currently looking at in the building, which are around 500 to 1,200, that those would meet the needs of the community. We had some employers in the office who said that their employees would fit into that span. And the whole goal of that first session was to really walk through, who is this serving? Our priority populations are really seniors and workforce. And the group really landed on workforce. That bringing more workforce members downtown, making this a lively development, a broad span of ages, but not restricting this to senior, was definitely the route to go. So we have redesigned the floor plans for the building, the new building, and the square footage isn't on what you're about to see, but it's rough, it's over 30,000 square feet, so we've definitely reduced the size. We've gone from 39 units to 32. And our ground floor commercial is limited to the co-op market, which is something that the Alger County Land Bank is really hoping to play an active role in supporting and developing, and childcare. So we've limited our commercial uses to 6,500 square feet of rentable square feet. And it has reduced our budget from over 21 million down to 14.5. In that budget, we've put a pro forma together. We've estimated sources coming in. Our goal is to file a 4% low-income housing tax credit application for the residential stories, the 32 units, and package that with other financing for the remaining pieces of the development, the ground floor commercial parking. Right now, we are anticipating approximately 3.8. Well, I don't know if it makes sense to go all through these, but we have about 10,363,000 in sources that are identified. And we're left with about a $4.2 million gap. And that's really where we're at this point. I think with that, we could probably. Is there anything else that the county wants to add about why we're here and what the goals are, or anything like that?
I think we pretty much gave everything that we've done so far.
Our timeline is tight. We want to have this finalized, all the financing applications in as quickly as possible. We wanted to get those in by September. It's August 14th. And we are hoping to close in the spring and start construction. That is our goal.
When you're saying $500, $1,500, is that 500, 1,500 square feet or dollars per?
Rents. The rents are actually $483 to $1,284. It goes from 483 to 12. Yep, so that's a income averaged spread for the
Okay.
units. And a lot of the input on rents came from the DDA. They wanted rents right in this area
When that happened?
in the first session.
I thought we had put them higher though,
Well,
at one point.
yeah, I do know the property owner does not want low income there. And he will not sell for low income. So if that comes around to that point, is that gonna be a problem?
What's low income for him? Like,
I
what
don't- yeah,
rents
that's
does
the-
he want to serve?
We broached that with Rick at the first meeting.
And he didn't really have a,
Well, when we explained to him what we were trying to do, he was very receptive. After we had proposed low income housing tax credit property on this parcel, which is 1.4 acres on Main Street downtown. Twice before. Before even Renovar got involved, and the property owners declined because they didn't want low income housing downtown. And when we took this approach and avoided low income housing tax credits, the rents came in high enough that the Downtown Development Authority objected to the rents because they were too high for the workers who needed to work downtown. And so they restructured the financing to bring the rents down as low as physically possible without reverting to tax credits.
I mean, if we can physically put it up a building and only charge that amount of rent, great. I mean, that's fine. Is it possible
So the rents that we're suggesting for the 2 residential floors will meet the requirements for the 4% low income housing tax credit. And as part of that conversation that we had in our first and second sessions, which I don't think the owners were in the second sessions, it was really about who are we serving and where do we want these rents to fall? And I remember Rick saying, My employees pay about 1,100 a month, which is smack dab in the middle of our range.
Oh, it's almost
That he would
high
want
end.
his employees to pay between 1,000 and 1,100 a
Not in the
month.
middle, that's way.
And that's a bank, right?
That's the high end, that's not in the middle, not even close. That's the
It's
high
in the high end, it's in the middle of our range, right? Of 483 to 1284.
It's in there, yeah, it's on
Yeah.
the high end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, well, thank you. At this point, you know, we are in conversations with the owner about moving forward. And their, statements have been if the advisory committee and the community is on board with the programming here, what the rents are, who we're charging and what we're providing, that they would be on board with moving forward.
How many, so are you still, how many units are you at now?
32.
Okay, so you're at 32, and how many, so you have some as low as 483 because you needed to get some up to 80%.
Yep.
And so you had to,
Yep.
you have to balance that, or you
Yep.
can't get any above 60.
Yep.
How many are at the low end?
It is split almost in thirds between the two. So it's, 10, 10 and 12, 10, 10, 12, I think.
So at below, at
60 is
40?
12, 10 is, yep,
Okay, so you have 40, 60 and 80.
correct.
Okay, okay. I see what you're trying to accomplish here.
Mhm.
Where is the 4.2 coming from? The gap.
So at this point, we are, so this structure still has the transformational brownfield in it. However, because the residential units will be, we will be requesting a pilot for the residential units. The tax increment capture for this plan will be different. It will be less. Also, the other taxes that are a benefit of this program will also be less, the income taxes and the withholding taxes. So the overall value for the transformational brownfield plan as of right now is only $765,000. In the original brownfield plan that we negotiated with the DDA, they wanted capture to stop at year 17. It was just a date that was selected. And so at 17 years of capture, and that could align with the 4%, we are thinking about ending the compliance period after 15 years and then converting to a market rate project, depending on the remaining sources in the deal. We want to talk more with Misha about that possibility. But so the value that's coming in from the MEDC side of this has gone down considerably. So our first ask was going to go back to MEDC and ask for the new taxes that are available under the transformational program, because sales and use tax is now capturable. I don't know how much that's going to add to the annual cash flow, but it's something that they can contribute. And then the other ask is CRP or RAP or another program that they have out. But it really does need to be a gap source because of the cash flow for the project.
And to answer your question, Amy, we really just started to get the resizing and arms around the gap to know,
Yeah.
how do we go back and look at this? Because Jim can add, part of the conversation is that Joe Rivet in the land bank, wants to start leading those conversations on how do we fill this gap? And while it's very ambitious,
So does
well,
Joe
the gap is far
Jim
less
have
than
a-
what we were looking at
Do they
before.
have since they're leading the discussions on filling the gap, I'd love to hear their ideas. Jim? Tischler?
He's,
Well, this is what you all are working on, starting when we started in June, was the reconstruction of the project leading to the reconstruction of the capital stack. So once the other elements in the capital stack get identified, then that identifies the remaining gap. In the state land bank's opinion, we think there's an opportunity and frankly, an obligation in part for MEDC to consider funding a portion of this project.
Our stack does include a $2 million equity component, and we, Jim had some great ideas about layering in some community capital portions in that, funded portion, since we have a little bit of time to do that. And then we have we have some other thoughts outside of MEDC, including, some of the greenhouse gas reduction funds and some other energy. This is a fully electric building.
Yeah, good.
Right, so, we just got the floor plans in from the architect yesterday. Our next step is to update the market study for Mishta. Karen Waite is waiting for me to, request the market study for the 4% process. And then we really need to get the pro formas out to the MEDC team and, Mishta and, the gentleman who was on our July meeting. His name starts with a J. We've not worked with him in the past. He was very helpful. Said
From
he-
Mishta?
Yes.
From Mishta. He was the technical staff on the call in July. What's his name?
He's the
asked-
one that filled in for,
He's from,
For Chad.
he's
for
from
Chad.
our Live Tech?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, we're not being helpful, but he was
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
Well, I'm glad he was helpful.
Yes, and he said that he could help shepherd, the performa internally
Good.
with, he and John Hunt.
Yeah,
Because we want to make sure, you guys know, when you're doing both an MEDC and a Light Tech
Yeah.
performa, you got to make sure everybody's rules are accounted for. So the next step is to get the performas out to the two agencies, get some real feedback from MEDC.
okay.
Can we add the extra taxes? Is there any chance for RAP or anything else? Devon's on the phone. We do need to go through some other public processes. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I want to circle back first. I mean, I think, now that we've identified the gap and know still that as we said, this has always been a very highly ambitious
Yeah.
project to push through any type of housing. We've been working here for years. Started to have
Yeah,
conversations on what the sources and if we, what sources are realistic. And if there's opportunity, especially now, as those sources continue to shrink quickly, sooner rather than later, and what needs to be targeted in the gap, as Jill said, and then we can we have some new public processes that have to we have to re-engage. So we have to go back through the DDA, we have to update the transformational brownfield, we have to, move through the pilot process, and we will have either a rezone, whether we go through a rezone or a PUD on this, to resize that, all of those public pieces will need to move through fairly quickly. And we plan on doing that. Once we have a plan, once we have a strategy and everyone's in agreement, we're ready to move forward.
so the only two roadblocks that you see so far is making sure the owner is willing to sell
Yes.
for the new type of project, and then really just filling this gap.
Yep.
Yes,
That's not bad.
thank you. Well, you know where we were before,
Yeah.
certainly, and just some of those pieces. And we are, as Jill said, we are engaged with the owner, just so you
There's a
know,
call
and
tomorrow.
having conversations already, and they've proposed, they've got proposals on potentially how to move forward. So those conversations are underway.
So I know there was state legislation about community equity that was being
Mhm.
proposed. Did that make it through or no?
As far as I know, it hasn't passed yet, and the one you're talking about is the legislation that would provide an
Chris-
income tax credit, Chris
Yeah.
Miller,
Yeah.
for, which I think is absolutely brilliant.
That's so cool.
I know, and, we did put some messages into Joe Tate. So basically, it is a crowdfunding initiative where if you're an individual and you invest in a crowdfunded development, you get an income tax abatement reduction credit
it's
for
equal.
investing in community projects.
Equal to it, so it's really like
Very
basically
interesting. Yep.
only up to like a small dollar.
Jill's-
but it's cool.
Jill's already talked to Chris Miller specifically on this project.
Yeah, and I do think we will probably go through his vehicle for this raise, and I've spoken with his attorney as well. And we will probably start that raise very soon.
Because I think if you did get that raise going, it would put some pressure on both MEDC and the State Land Bank Authority and Mission to see what we could do to fill the rest of the gap,
Yeah.
right? If the community wants this project that bad, that they're willing to personally invest their own dollars, at a certain dollar amount, that says a lot.
We've got $500,000 into it,
Oh, and when you say community, you mean like residents?
I think the people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is cool.
So you're looking for public,
So 1-for-1 tax credit?
It was, yeah, it's a dollar for dollar
It was
investment.
like up to $3,000, so it was
Yeah,
like
it's not-
a
oh.
way to get individuals to put in, I can only put in 500, or I can only put in 1,000. But for just your everyday person who doesn't have money to start their own venture capital fund, but to be able to like, oh, I'm gonna invest in this housing project because it meets my values and what I think is important, but I also will ultimately get a return because I'm a part owner with my $500 or my $1,000.
I mean, we can still move forward.
Kind of
with-
cool.
Yeah, with a portion of this being a community capital raise, which was the state land bank suggestion, which is great. Whether or not that legislation
Yeah.
passes, but we are gonna work behind the scenes to push that because we think it's brilliant.
The hindrance, well, and it's still prevalent in this room today, is the term low income.
we have,
Well, I mean, the thing
and the
is,
only hindrance that has is from the seller right now.
Right.
If we can pass it
Well,
to the
no.
seller.
It had the DDA stop this project twice.
but I think it's workforce housing. The people who live in here.
Can we
work.
call it that?
Yeah.
Can you change the name of low
Well,
income
we have
housing
been
tax
talking
credits?
about, because the federal-
To mix in
Right.
my tax,
Yeah.
not my tax, my tax.
Yeah, because, I mean, they're working people who live here,
I know.
so that's the difference. It's
And
like-
when we explained that to the property owner, he understood that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the stigma attached to
I know,
low income
it's awful.
housing is just, it's unbeatable at times.
if you can walk the people through, these are people we see every single day. It's your bank teller. It's the person who is, at the grocery store checking you out.
Right.
These are people you talk to and converse with and think are
Agreed.
important people in your community, yet you don't wanna help make sure that they can be housed.
We asked the property
Right.
owner, who is the vice president or the president of the local bank, there's only one bank in town. One bank, one credit union. How much his employees could afford to pay rent.
Yeah.
And he said $1,000.
And you're like, they can live here. Yep.
Yeah.
At least 10 of them could.
1100.
Yeah,
And the absence of housing is girdling our economy. It's not. We have, how many officers we need at Alger Max? 64? We have a maximum security prison just outside of town.
Yeah.
64 COs short.
That's statewide though, too. It ain't just Munising, though. It's
Right.
not housing.
Well, housing is an aspect, and we have the National Park Service and the National Forest Service who can't recruit or attract professional staff. We have Mativ, the paper mill here, it's a one chimney town. They can't attract professional staff because there's no housing. There's just no housing.
And they did.
And
give
how
us
much
the
land do
letter.
they own there though?
Mativ? They own the waterfront down there to the coal pile.
See, back when that CCI started that, they built half this town for their employees.
They did.
Now they're sitting on a big chunk of land there. Maybe they
Donate it?
should let some of that go to put
It's-
housing if they're worried about housing.
It
So
took
it's-
almost an act of Congress to get them permission to hold the car show down there because it is in Department of Homeland Security buffer zone, because we're an international port.
So we are seeing more businesses get involved in housing throughout the state. Because they feel the need. And we all know that a lot of our towns were company towns and companies did build the original housing. We were just this week, gosh, it's been a long week. On Monday in Saginaw, where there's an employer there who invested $2.5 million in creating housing around their place of employment so that they can have places for their employees to live. So, I mean, I know that's not your project, but in the long term, we're happy to come and talk to any employers. We have a new employer assisted housing guide on our website that kind of goes through different ways in which employers can be involved, from the donation of land to providing equity. And when we ask them to provide equity, it's not like they're not gonna get a return,
Right.
right? We're not necessarily saying grant it.
I'm not optimistic that we can convince corporations to invest money in housing for their employees.
Whirlpool just did it with you guys.
Back in the day, they had to.
We
do it.
did,
They
but we-
absolutely
We're gonna
had
have
to
to
do
do
it.
it
They
here,
built
right?
the town around the
Right
factory.
now, they're publicly saying they need this.
Yeah.
So if they're publicly saying it,
But the problem is the need is so great here, and this is a federally funded program, we would not be able to restrict these units to their employees.
No, we're
So-
talking not your project,
Not-
we're talking
not-
about.
Other ones, I mean,
they could do their own.
They could do their
yeah.
own. But yes, we get.
And we
you.
are doing that with Whirlpool. in Benton
And yeah,
Harbor.
and there are ways to restrict it even with federal money. It's just the city, some other funding source has to restrict it. And then the federal government will go with the restriction. Somebody found a loophole that we're starting to use.
I have not seen that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
This income tax credit we were talking about a second ago, can
Yeah.
corporations apply for that?
They
If it's
can apply
Can they?
for the local company tax credit?
No, the Chris Miller, income tax.
Oh, I don't know. I
Just
think it's just
individuals.
individuals.
Just
That's
individuals?
3,000 per person, or isn't it?
Well, that's to get if he got the legislation passed, which it sounds like he hasn't. That's what it was suggested. It was more about how do you get the average Joe to invest
There's,
in their communities. It didn't have to be for housing. It could have been for a million different things.
there's 2,500 people in the city and only 8,000 people in the county. I don't know how much local investment we would get out of that population base.
Well, and this does have to, retain a piece of the equity raise has to be through the Opportunity Zone program. Because I believe that some of the county commissioners really wanted to see that be a part of the financing.
This is an opportunity zone,
It is,
but you're no longer eligible for new market tax credit?
right?
Well, that's strange.
It's dumb.
Huh.
Yeah. So,
This is a good location for opportunity zone, especially if you take, or plan on taking it out of compliance in 15 or 17 years, because the increase in the value of that property will really increase and they'll get their ROI then.
Right.
If they can be patient.
so one of the next things that we need to do is go in front of the DDA. I would like to talk to, Rob Garza's team at MEDC and really understand what the likelihood is of the sales and use tax. Because, the DDA is gonna wanna see an updated tip table with the impact to their capture. We had negotiated an administrative fee for the DDA on a yearly basis. And, you know, it really, if we can still give them that administrative fee, their yearly impact won't be the same. It's just the overall taxable value of the building is gonna be less. It's gonna be a third less because it's a smaller building. But one of our next stops is to go to the DDA with the updated projections for this, once I confirm with Rob Garza what we're able to include.
Yeah, I know they still have it in their plan to do this.
And maybe I'll bring up a little bit of a painful, conversation and while we're public, I mean, but you know, once again, as we're talking about shrinking sources and a lot more shrinking sources from Mishta.
Yeah.
That we've had. I mean, the way that we look at sources right now is wrapped to get reallocated. And we know sometimes that, you know, looking at LIHTC and MEDC sources don't always work as well together, but it's not impossible. And we've got, but it would fill the gap.
Okay.
I mean, just, and that's a conversation, I think, at the state level. And you know, that's just us having our own internal political sources of where we see
We're
potential.
happy for
Yeah.
them to. invest in our- So
That's what we wanted
it's
you
not
to
a-
say.
It's not a
That's
Mishta
what-
issue, and nor has it.
No.
It's an MEDC policy issue.
But right, when we're just looking logistically, like, is there a source? Because, you know, Mishta has been at the table for the last year with multiple sources to fill the gap. You know, that is a source potentially that would meet all the underwriting requirements. And right now, we know it got reallocated. I don't know. I didn't see as many line item allocations in RAMP as I did in Mishta sources, right?
There's only, I think, the 25 or 20 million for Lou Glacier's project, but yeah.
Well, one of the things that MEDC, there are a couple of things that they responded to in the first quarter. One was, the change in requirements for the commercial spaces, but it was really about the imbalance of the investment between MEDC and Mishta, because at that point, we only had missing middle from Mishta at, I forget what our word was, 3 point something. And we were asking for 9 million from MEDC. So I think we do need to, we need to approach this gap from a balance perspective, and I think we should go in front of MEDC, but we should be pulling in other sources to make sure that, I don't see MEDC coming in with a $5 million injection or a $6 million injection with TBP and RAP. I don't see that happening, but I think we just need to start that conversation with Rob and team, figure out how we can maximize the TBP and, continue on the other paths that we're on. And in the meantime, resubmit to Devin, and Devin, we need to have a conversation about PUD versus resubmitting. Which we talked to Barry about this morning, so we'll want to set a call. Yep. And
Yeah, just let me know what works for you guys.
and in that conversation, we will talk about pilot. Does the city have a citywide ordinance for pilot? I think I've asked you this before.
We do not. We only have one property specific, and that's for that Moda development up on Cox Edition.
Okay, so, we wouldn't get to that point until closer to site plan approval anyway, so we'll just make sure that we have those conversations with the DDA and get everything ready. So that would be our first piece, and then just submitting the performance to the different agencies, like I said, and keep moving forward, but we're gonna do everything simultaneously, not consecutively.
There is some, hopefully, I mean, I know you said that this is gonna be all electric, so you should keep your ears open on if and when the state does their solar for all rollout. Cause you might be able to pick some grant money up that way. Or some rebate money. And then it might be. You probably should reach out to Climate United right now, cause they're building their pipeline and for their multifamily. Investment. Now that would be low interest rate loans.
Is this another greenhouse gas? So we have been talking to Michigan Saves, Eli and.
Yeah, so this is, they got a different allocation. So I would keep talking to Eli, but I would also talk to,
Climate United.
yeah, I think it's like Nicole Ferreira or something. Not your last name, but something similar.
Another Italian,
Something like that before.
right? Another Italian.
She's, out of New York City.
So we have only looked at Michigan, so Senair and Michigan Saves, I think, are the only two allocatees in Michigan as far as I
City
know,
was
right?
technically part of the Climate United too, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
So they could, also probably connect you to Nicole.
okay.
Or I could, if you send me an email, I can give you her contact info.
Do you know, is there any other, we've been watching all the EJ,
Yeah,
I mean, because we're gonna see regionally. It's just rural still doesn't meet all the justice portions. So we're watching that too. I mean, is there any other conversation? I think they're still waiting to see where those federal funds, because most of the federal funds are direct
yeah.
through the EPA.
I think, so the funds that I'm talking about that like Climate United has and Michigan State is through the EPA. So we might be talking about the same fund.
Yeah, it's all coming from.
Well,
It's all
these are
coming
all
from
the-
environmental justice, because it's all greenhouse gas, you
Yes.
know, coming from
Yep,
greenhouse
the
gas
GBR
or the environmental justice side.
Yeah. But you're kind of hitting their sweet spot of time. So I think like Climate United was planning on putting out their first loans either fourth quarter or first quarter of next year.
Okay.
So like your timeline is like right in there, and that might
Okay.
help close the gap just because of the lower, I mean, like 2% money, like it's cheap.
That is awesome. Yeah, we have a call, we've been talking to
And
Eli
it
for
sounds like
months.
you're already doing the requirements.
Yeah. Okay,
Have you talked to our local power provider?
Yes, we've been talking to UPCO for a while. We brought in a group called Community Catalyst, which is an energy programmer. We're going all electric, and we've already like aligned with all the rebate programs and everything moving forward. We haven't yet programmed in solar because there still was a cost of service versus the rebate, but some of the new tools that may change. So yes, we have met with them multiple times. I mean, and we originally talked to DTE, but they're just gas, so now we're going all electric, they're out, but. We just saw Andrew at the housing thing. Circle back with him now.
It is Nicole for
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Well, look at me, I got it right.
FERREIRA. And that,
We'll follow up, Joe.
I know, I like to write my own name down.
I know, that's what I like.
and then the crowdfunding legislation is House Bill 4691.
Yep.
Abraham Ash bill, which is in-house tax policy. And I just talked to my counterpart at Treasury, and obviously they're opposed to all things tax credit.
Yeah, all right.
Who knows?
What's gonna happen in supplemental? Maybe we should have a side conversation about that.
We've heard that that's not even happening until lame duck, so we don't know, but we should know more.
And maybe that's the conversation, because it's timing key. Are we gonna have a little, like, can we know what gap is now? I, you know, once again, like, is there gonna be anything that happens in
You just
supplemental
don't
or
know.
lame duck?
We're not close enough to know. I don't, you know me, I tell all, and I just don't know.
Sounds like the usual.
Yeah. Hurry up and wait.
You shovel in.
So
gotta
the
be ready.
community
Gotta
really,
be-
thank you very much for stopping in personally.
good.
The community really requested this. And I think, you know, certainly as the last Mishta meeting we had was so helpful because, you know, number one, to know, I think, your 4% applications, we were told there were 60 submissions. And I think perspective is key for a lot of the small communities who don't understand how competitive these resources are. And certainly there was a lot of conversation because, you know, when the county had called MEDC, their response was, well, they just didn't get their things in. So, you know, kind of understanding that we didn't secure all of our LOIs and things for the tenant, which is not the usual process. You know, being able to have that conversation, but I think, most of the questions, as we said, it's their interaction from understanding that they've had experience with poorly programmed public housing, you know, where people with no incomes, oftentimes voucher recipients, that Mishta products are very different. And,
That's right.
and
We're not-
Mishta has, if anything, a very stringent, there's very few developers that can meet the experience threshold to even qualify. And Mishta, and I am speaking on your behalf, so staff, you know, Mishta requires compliance every year to ensure that properties are properly managed, that, you know, they're looking at site, that they're getting audited
We do.
financials,
And
they're
we do
getting.
on-site inspections too, to make sure that the physical aspects of the buildings are kept up as well as the financial aspect. We also hold our property management companies that do the property management to a high standard. And when we do occasionally get calls from tenants, we act on them immediately. So it is a better form of oversight than you would get just from relying on your own code enforcement folks maybe to check on a property. When Mishta's involved, you got a whole nother layer of people really keeping an eye on what's happening. And it's not public housing, and a lot of people do, because they're both funded by the government, think they're the same thing, but they are very different in how they're funded, how they're operated, and how they're built, and who they serve.
I was a property manager for 207 light tech units in Mark Cabin. I can echo that sentiment.
That's right.
I know what the regulations are. And
We
the properties are
worked on the
maintained
first
to an incredibly high
8-11.
standard. And the finances of the property are required to meet those same standards so that they're not allowed to get run down. And the screening of tenants is also rigid. If you could change the name from low income housing tax credits,
Yeah,
can you do that? No.
I mean, we could name ours however, whatever we want. It would just be the tax, but that, it's a federal program.
Mixed income, or
Yeah, I
workforce.
think we could say I think that the LIHTC vehicle from the federal government is a workforce housing program.
That they would need to sign off on a name change.
Well, we can talk to them. Treasury, US Treasury.
It is such a hindrance. I haven't seen it here in Munising on a very personal basis,
Oh, it is everywhere.
but in other communities as well. Munising in 1974 built 3 Section 8 housing developments, a 64 unit senior development on the waterfront, on the lake.
Wow.
And then 4 3-bedroom units up at the west end, and then they built 12 2-bedroom units out here in the highway. And nobody understands stigma until you see these people walking on the side of the highway back and forth to the grocery store because they don't drive and they can't drive. And everybody associates low-income housing with, yeah. And it is in fact workforce housing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And usually people who are in a Section 8 house or have a voucher are so happy to be in housing. They are the best tenants you get.
Yeah,
Because they don't want to lose their voucher, because if you misbehave, you lose your voucher forever.
Yeah.
From us. Just because there's so many people that need them.
Yeah.
That are good tenants, so.
I'd like to personally thank you for taking the time to come to Munising.
Oh, of course.
One of these days, if it's up to these 2 ladies, we will get it built.
Oh,
And 32 units doesn't sound like a lot. But I don't know that there's, what is Windjammer, 16? Or 24? No, it's 24. Not Windjammer, I'm Grandview. Grandview. That's 24 units. That's the largest apartment building in town.
yeah.
And then all of the surplus homes have been turned into VRBOs.
I, the first time I came through here, I thought it was so beautiful. I went home and told my husband, I'm like, we gotta buy a house in Munising. So he started looking and he's like, we can't afford a house in Munising.
Probably by 5 years.
Yeah, it took, in 2015, it just exploded.
Yeah,
But look at what it did do. You could go down a block and we had a lot of rundown houses.
Yes.
They were, it looked pretty bad.
Yeah.
Now, it's a lot different.
yeah, people have invested.
A lot of money, that's what people don't realize too. A lot of money has been invested in our,
Yes, but most of it from locals.
yes.
As the mayor, I used to get grief about the blight situation in Munising. I was elected mayor in 93. And then we solved that. We are Pierre, Michigan. We're the poster community for Pierre, Michigan. And in 2015, that really took off. And then people were complaining to me because their tax bill was going up. And I said, well, we haven't raised your taxes.
That's right, because you can't in
Your
Michigan.
property has doubled in value.
Yeah.
So your tax bill's gonna climb incrementally. And that's a good thing.
I know. That's how you build the generational wealth right there.
Hey, Rod, when I get those customers in the office, I'll give them your number from now on. That's a good spiel.
You go ahead, Devin.
I mean, you can't over 3% in the state of
Right.
Michigan. Your taxes
Right.
can increase more than that anyway. At least right now they can.
But it's the people who have second homes.
Oh, wow, I
Or,
feel
yeah.
really bad for those second homeowners. Oh,
Your beers.
yeah.
That's what they got charged for.
I think that's it. Does
Yeah.
anyone online have any questions for Mishta?
Only thing I want to say is I apologize for not being there in person. I got a late request to give a presentation to the DNR Trust Fund Board this morning about an application we submitted. So I've been trying to get back to the UP. In fact, I'm parked in front of the Chubby Lake or in Trout Lake right now. So, but thank you for coming. And I look forward to continue working with Jill and Shannon and Rod and the whole advisory committee as we move forward on this.
Thanks, Devin.
Thanks, Devin.
So now we just gotta go, what's the next step though?
So next up, we have to submit our pro formas to both MISTA and MEDC to start the 4% analysis process. So their staff will dig into our numbers and make sure that we represented everything accurately, that we're meeting their requirements. And MEDC is gonna be looking at our pro forma to see what they can contribute. So those processes will start at the same time. We need to talk to Devin with Barry present about what the process is, if we should go PUD or if we are just doing an amended site plan. We'll make that decision and then resubmit as quickly as possible. And, a third prong is for us to start this capital raise and start lining those pieces up. There's some homework that has to be done for that. We have to do, some audited financial statements and things like that. So there's some homework we have to do, but we're really gonna be doing 3 things at once.
And so what does your site control look like right now?
It's expired.
Okay, so you don't have it right this second. Okay, so that's a big next step.
It is, but that's happening tomorrow.
That's
We have
underway.
a call happening tomorrow on
Okay.
that piece.
Okay.
Just
But
tell Rick that we're gonna identify as
Workforce housing.
housing.
Well, it is workforce housing.
I think
Very
he's
much
past
so.
that issue. Our discussion with them right now is just about timing and structure. They have not brought up the issue of income targeting again after that last meeting.
You know, and it's really a mixed income property.
it is.
And I had a member of the DDA who was vehemently opposed to low income housing downtown. And he brought up the social aspect of if everybody living in that apartment development is low income, there's a lack of role models for children. And I said, well, not necessarily, but he's a staunch conservative. And he was touting the very idea of if they live in a mixed income apartment
better.
building, you have exposure to other income levels and
There is
You-
some truth to that. Like,
there
we've
is.
done a lot of research about that. I'm a pro mixed income development person myself and
can you
So-
change the name? Come on, please change the name, Amy.
you know, it's an idea I'm gonna bring it up.
I appreciate that.
Why not?
I told Amy that we need a pure Michigan campaign for workforce housing in Michigan,
I'm on, sign me up.
right? Where's that money gonna come from?
Well-
But we have this conversation in community after community where there is this automatic stigma to the word low income housing, but then when we walk through their income and their rents and their jobs that are open, always the same outcome. Oh,
I think a big problem with this though is the location, right, this is a piece of town that's right on Main Street. I think that's where most people are thinking. To have this right on our main street with, and we are a tourist town. We're
Yeah.
trying to bring tourists into our town, and this is one of our highlights of our street. And they don't wanna see that in there.
But-
That's what
Well,
they're
that's-
waiting
What they don't understand is that the investment coming to the tax equity is gonna be far surpass what market rate's going to be, especially with the cost of construction right now here and that gap, and that when you do provide housing, what we call placemaking, the best thing is to have it right in town where they can walk to everything.
Yeah.
So the
People-
investment that comes from these equity sources is far than what you generally, in almost all cases, what your market rate investment's going to be, because if you, and Bromley had a great conversation with Rick on this, because he's like, well, what if we just built this? I mean, you've got to look at the cost right now of, as you know, as a businessman, right? Like the cost of construction, when we start to be, we're pushing high 2s and
Oh, easy.
3s right now here in square footage, like we're not gonna get the type of significant investment in the design requirements and things generally, and now, especially in town with all the new building code requirements from a material, the cost of that alone, our cost and soft costs and just architectural are in the millions. So are you going to really get that type of investment locally into a market rate with cash out of pocket? Like, has Munising seen a market rate investment in housing right now, even for this, even at $10 to $15 million, moving into 20 million? Like, you've got to look at these type of resources.
If you do a market rate, you're looking at rents of 2,200 and up.
And you're talking the
Per month.
gentrification.
I did that.
yes.
Yeah, so like.
I mean,
can you-
between
you're
4 and
renting
5 bucks a
for
square foot.
$2,200 a month
Yep.
for a
Yeah.
2-bedroom apartment,
And there's the perception,
right? Like,
the perception is reinforced that we build low-income housing downtown, we're putting the projects downtown, you know, and it's gonna be a deteriorating public housing property.
Yeah,
But, and it's not, it's gonna be an incredibly well-maintained, incredibly attractive mixed-income housing development. And what we have there now is 1.4 acres in the heart of the downtown that has been vacant for 30 years.
yeah.
Also, if you look at Main Street has an economic development analysis that shows when you look at workforce and your workers and putting them with other housing in the downtown, what their economic expenditures are to your everyday business.
What
They actually
guarantees
spend
that
more.
the workforce is gonna be in there and not just
Ooh,
non-workers?
well, cause you can't afford the rent if you're not.
You
working.
have to be income qualified.
You wouldn't make it, and I bet like, if you look at Petoskey right now has a live tech deal right downtown. Traverse City has 3.
Yeah.
Right downtown Traverse City, cause they need the workers
Workforce.
so bad.
Yep.
Little Frankfurt
in
has
this-
a beautiful one right downtown, so these are other cities that also rely on tourism.
And one thing we
To
didn't provide,
qualify for this, to rent one of these, you have to have income there.
Yeah, absolutely,
And that should,
you have to
that
have
could-
income.
and not only that,
What-
Dean, we provided this to Rick, you know, we're working with a large MISTA approved management company that will come in and beyond that, we can't guarantee, we're like everyone else, we deal with renters just like everyone else here, but we will have very strict requirements within our rental policies
I
right
think
now
that
for
would go a long
management.
ways if the DDA knows that, is,
Mhm.
you know, you have to have income to qualify for these.
Mhm.
I think their vote before was thinking they're gonna get a bunch of people with no jobs at all.
Yeah, well, they actually approved this development the last time around because we explained that to them.
Yeah.
But they had. Well, the last 2 times we tried to develop that property, if one time Rick wouldn't sell it because he didn't want low income housing downtown. And he had other ideas on the property, and the time before that, Earl Hahn at Community Action offered dirt cheap price for the property, and it wasn't a realistic purchase, offer.
Like I said, as a county, my personal, I'm all for low income, because that's what we need. I'm not for no income, because I don't think that's gonna help the community at all.
Okay,
When,
well, what if I was a 100% disabled veteran,
Then you should be getting,
but I don't have a job, I'm a 100% disabled veteran,
you should be getting income.
right? Okay,
I mean, you do, cause you have SSI.
but what if I was on social security disability?
You should be getting income.
Okay. You know, you can't rent even, what's the cheapest or the deepest subsidy, Michelle, go $50 a month for the,
For, housing choice voucher,
yeah,
it's currently 50, but it's about to go up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, and to that answer.
but these don't have vouchers, right? You're not
No,
getting
no
vouchers.
vouchers.
Not right now, we don't have any program. When we do income certification, they're in specific thresholds and there's requirements for verification and documentation. They're pretty comprehensive in anything that we
And I think
do.
that's what the people need to hear. I think, I don't see a stop to this, if this is what
Just a
you're,
better narrative of what
Right.
you're actually doing. I get that.
Okay.
We
I'm gonna
actually
go
have
cook
a
some
little
workouts.
slide that you made up, Josh, that shows the type of workers that typically make the different income levels, so people can get an understanding of like, I don't want those people, but it's really your kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That would.
Well, and that was the
The graduate
convincing,
from college that makes $35,000 or $40,000 a year.
And we have done that. And
that
we've
was
done
the
it with
convincing
local
argument for
jobs.
the
We-
property.
So you already did it.
We
That
pulled,
wasn't
we
enough?
pulled job postings, yeah.
When we asked the president of the bank what his employees could afford, and he said $1,000, that he convinced himself with his answer.
But
Right, cause you know they probably can't afford that.
yeah, but the understanding here, just like a lot of the small communities that you deal with is, you know, when we came in, it was, we don't want low income housing, but when we came in with our first proposed rents on missing middle,
It's too high.
we were like, they were like, these are too high, and our answer was, well, this is low income targeting in the low income, like you're in 50% AMI, and it was like, no, we're not, like,
Oh.
so, you know, I think this community doesn't understand that $1,200 is still considered low income rents here.
Yeah.
They're, in their mind, the original conversation has moved up, but the 500 to 800 spectrum was what they felt was their market.
Before the explosion of VRBOs in 2015. If you wanted to rent a 3-bedroom home in an R1 neighborhood, you could expect to pay $400 or $500 a month rent.
Hmm.
That's how the values have increased.
What is it now?
Good.
1,200 if you can find one,
Oh,
if you
Okay.
can find
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, to give a little perspective, I rented a house from Rick from the bank, a whole 3-bedroom, 1-bath house in 2016 for $500 a month with a 2-car garage.
Interesting.
nice.
Not
Hold on to that.
The last rental I saw in the market was a duplex. It was a 3-bedroom duplex. It was $2,200 a month.
Oh, for one, yeah, wow.
All right,
All right,
thank
I
you
gotta go
all.
cook some
We
brooks up,
appreciate
make
it.
dip. Got a 99
So,
to go to tomorrow.
Can we
99?
set a date for
Not
September
mine.
for the next one? And we'll get it out to the rest of the advisory group.
I'll have a friend who's turning 99.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Signing up.
When is the